Hello, welcome to another Ready Aim Roll video. Today we're going to start taking a dive into the world of Delta Green. But before we do that, if you like seeing these RPG reviews and flip-throughs, something that I want to be doing more and more of as time goes on, exploring different games outside of the world of, Dungeons and Dragons and Warhammer. As much as I love that stuff, there's other games out there, and that's what I want this channel to be more focused on. So if that's something that you're interested, there's buttons down here. The subscribe will be around here, and there'll be like buttons if you do, for some reason, like this video. So yeah, Delta Green is a role-playing game, as the tagline says here. A role-playing game of Lovecraftian horror and conspiracy. So it's based on a setting for the old uh, Call of Cthulhu game from Chaosium, which was kickstarted back in 2016 as its own individual game system, which is what you see here. So it's heavily based on things like the X-Files, which is a series that, until I got this book, I hadn't watched myself. I'd seen the odd clip, the odd maybe episode growing up, but it was, it was a little bit before my time, which is nice to be able to say nowadays. So more and more often I'm saying, yeah, more and more often I'm now used to feeling old, even though I'm only 27. Anyway, the book, as you open it, gives you a really nice sort of scene setting of old government documents and handwritten notes with things that, as you can see, have been redacted. So it gives you a good vibe of what to expect in the game and over the course of this book. You get a nice extensive contents page, which is always good to see. And that puts you into the overview. The overview is fairly standard. Mostly it's about telling you about the vibe and type of game it is. So, as it said on the cover, it is a Lovecraftian horror game with sort of overtones of investigation. So, you will, for the most part, be playing some sort of government agents. Specifically, at least for Delta Green, US agents. Though, that being said, once you get this book, whether physically or PDF, it's your game. You can just go, I'm going to be setting this game in the UK or Sweden or anywhere else. You can come up with your own law for your own national organizations, that sort of thing. But it gives you an idea of just saying, this world is not happy. You don't maybe don't get too attached to your characters because they're gonna suffer horrible fates. So if that's not the sort of game you want to be playing, this definitely isn't the game for you, because you're not a badass hero in this game. You're living and breathing in this uncaring, unfeeling world that's out to get you, really. But if that sort of thing does intrigue you, then this is definitely a book for you. Yep. As I said, I think this art is better than the cover art, actually, because it says horror, it says weird, you know, something's going on. Even this weird little thing in the corner is better. And obviously we get onto the agents part of the book, so creating your character, and I think I think it's like a drawn over photo. I think it really sets up the vibe of playing the game. This dude's clearly not having a good time. He's in bits. Anyway, as mentioned, you will be playing some sort of agent, like government agent, mostly for the US. So that's where you will mostly be getting your sort of quote unquote classes from. So yeah, little breakdown of the character sheet. If you are, as I've mentioned, if you are familiar with the basic role-playing system and specifically Call of Cthulhu, this will be your very familiar to you. I think the only real difference is there's, I think, no education score, and the bonds, which are a key sort of mechanic of this game. So as you play the game, you will be testing those bonds, which are going to be friends and family outside of your work with Delta Green, and it could even be colleagues and things like that within your, I guess, day job. So the more you focus on your Delta Green work, the more your bonds will be tested, and the more you'll, be, I guess, dehumanized. But yeah, so that's a really fun concept. So it goes through a lot of how to roll your stats, which again is very similar to Call of Cthulhu, because it uses the basic role-playing system. And then we go into professions, which is your classes, basically. And most of them are going to be, government agents, but some of them, like in the additional professions section, are going to be a little bit more generic. So you've got foreign service officer, media specialists, firefighters, things like that. So you don't necessarily have to play as some sort of, FBI agent type thing. You can be a little bit more generic. You can even be a criminal if you want. So it sort of gives you the idea that, well, most of the agents that Delta Green hires, I guess is the word, are, government agent types. If you have some sort of aptitude for the work that they want to be done, you could be picked out of any other walk of life. It's just a case of if you're good at that work. So yeah, goes through an explanation of all the skills, because it is quite a skill-heavy game, given that it uses D100s and things. Yeah, goes through all your skills, more great art and imagery that is better than the cover, again, in my opinion. So yeah, really good, extensive explanations for skills, which is nice. You like to see it. More stuff on the character sheet and the game. So again, it'll go through how to roll dice, using skills. It's as much as the first time you look at it, the character sheet might look a little bit overwhelming. It's really quite simple once you've looked at it and looked through it with your GM or used a YouTube guide. Here we've got combat, so it's again mostly just using D100s, with the occasional, I think the damage dice themselves aren't D100s, just depends on the weapon. But again, in this game, combat's lethal. Combat is very lethal, so you're not expected to be going to combat too often. In fact, combat in Delta Green and Call of Cthulhu is, I think, to be avoided at all costs, if you can at all help it as players. Because obviously, your GM's going to want to try and put some danger in front of you. And here we have the sanity. As much as I hate the phrase sanity, it exists. The whole gamifying mental health thing fucking sucks, and I'm glad that a lot of games are starting to move away from using sanity as a game mechanic. That you can still use. You can still use the system and the actual mechanic of it without calling it sanity. I think it's just a bit gross. But that's just me. Maybe I'm just clutching my pearls a bit too much. But yeah, it is a core factor of the game. And I think it works. It's just the name of it I don't like. So yeah, it's there. It exists. Again, if you're used to Call of Cthulhu, sounding like a broken record at this point, it will be very, very familiar to you. And home, this is where we talk a little bit about your bonds. So this will go over a lot of, I guess, post-session stuff. So, like downtime, basically. So once you've done all the horrific shit you needed to do for your session, this is where you look at things that you might want to do in the evenings or during your day job. This is where, if you find something during a Delta Green mission that you've picked up and you want to look into even more, that's going to start eating into your home life, because you're looking at something weird and unpleasant that the world isn't meant to know about. So yeah, it's really fun. And here we go into equipment. A lot of this will come down to what organization you work for. So obviously, if you work, for example, as a blogger, which is a character that I've made for whenever I get to play this, you're obviously not going to have access to military hardware, or especially a blogger's not going to have access to really anything. Maybe a few contacts, maybe something like that, but you're definitely not going to have, access to artillery. That's just not gonna happen. But yeah, unless maybe you steal something. But yeah, the equipment list in this game, again, is quite extensive, giving you an idea of the things you can do. And here's a section on federal agents. So this goes through a lot of federal agencies within the US, because again, you're US agents for the most part. And it goes. This section is really clearly quite well researched. Wouldn't surprise me if they had a lot of people from these fields going, okay, what is it that you do on a day-to-day basis? Which I think is really, really cool. It gives you, especially if you're not from the US like myself, and the players that I'm going to mostly be playing this with, should I ever get it to the table, it's going to give you an idea of how to play your characters, which I think is really cool. And then you've got soldiers, defense contractors, things like that. So yeah, it's really, really good, really well written and researched. So this is a good chunk of the book, actually. And then we go into the appendices. So yeah, a lot of this is just going back over and simplifying some other bits from the book so you can sort of more quickly reference it. A extensive glossary of terms and agencies and things like that, just really useful. And your index, and finally your acknowledgements and all the backers for the Kickstarter. And finally, a character sheet that you can photocopy or find online as a PDF. And the Open Games license, which is interesting to see in this. But yeah, so this has been Delta Green from Arc Dream Publishing, the Agent's Handbook. It's a good book. I really, really like it. I picked it up as a double box set with the Handler's Guide, which is your GM's book, for about 50 quid, I think it was. So yeah, if you're interested in this sort of game, very much worth it, especially if you're playing modern games. Obviously, Call of Cthulhu is fairly system agnostic. You can play modern games, but this very specifically has information and equipment built into the system. So yeah, if this is sort of the sort of thing you want to see more of, I'll definitely show off the other books in the setting that I have. So at the moment I've only got the Handler's Guide and the sort of Quick Start Guide. So yeah, if those are things you want to see, let me know, and I'll make videos on them. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. See ya.